So I think it started recording now. Hi everyone who's listening to the recording. The class I'm going to give for you today is blockchain basics. This is the part one. I decided to split it into two parts because, well, if I did it all in one go, it would be too long and I would lose people's attention. So first, let's start with what is a blockchain. Well, let's start with a formal definition. A blockchain is a growing list of records called blocks that are linked together using cryptography. Each block contains a cryptographic hash of the previous block and timestamps and transaction data. Okay, so if you didn't sleep with this, this nonsense, you're probably asking, what does that even mean? Well, let's forget about the technology for a second and think about exchanging things, right? If we are in the physical world, it's very simple to verify if an exchange is valid. For example, say I have an orange and I'm sitting right beside Pete, right? And I decide to give him the orange. Well, I now have 0 oranges and Pete has 1 orange, and everyone can see that, right? You can see that I don't have any oranges. Well, what about the digital world, right? Well, if I have a single digital orange, let's call them B oranges, what guarantees that when I give it to Pete, he's the only one with that B orange? I could just as well send it all to my friends or over the internet, and now my single D orange became a whole lot more D oranges, right? This is what we call the double spending problem, where you can spend a single asset multiple times over and over. Okay, so how can we solve that problem? Well, it's simple, right? We can just register all exchanges that happen in a book or somewhere. It can belong to a single person we all trust, which is a centralized solution, right? So that would be a bank or something like that. Or everyone can have a copy of that book, and we sync our copies every time there is a new exchange, which is a decentralized solution, right? Okay, but how do we verify an exchange if everyone has their own? Can people just add fake exchanges? Like, can I just add, like, Pete gives me 100 oranges, and now I have 100 oranges? Well, that's why we have public and secret keys, and also consensus mechanisms. A secret key generates a custom signature, like a number, and that signature can be verified with the public key. So you can't know a person's secret key with just having the public key, but you can verify that it was their secret key that generated the signature, right? Okay. So can transactions just be copied? So we now have established that a new transaction will only be valid if the sender is the one who started it. Like, I can't write, right? Pete sent me 100 oranges. But can't I just copy? Like, if Pete sends me 1 orange once, can I just copy? Like, Pete sends me 1 orange, Pete sends 1 orange, and I get now 100 oranges anyway. If we attribute a unique transaction ID to each and every transaction, then that transaction won't be able to be copied over and over again. Okay? Right. So we solved that problem. We have a whole lot more, and that's why, cryptocurrency took such a long time to become a thing. Can people just overspend? Like, say I had just 10 oranges at the start, and I say, for example, I give it 20 oranges. I didn't have their orange, right? So how can you know that I'm not overspending and not selling funds I don't have? Well, if we keep a history of all transactions and make it invalid for someone to pay with what they don't have, we prevent this, right? Because, well, I had 10 oranges at the start, and I say, well, I gave Pete 1 orange, I gave Susie 1 orange, I gave Bandito 1 orange. Now I have 7 oranges, right? And I can't spend more than that. Now, transaction, because we did that, it's dependent on all transactions that came before it. So, the transaction I made at one point is only valid because all the transactions before that point were valid. Okay, but now we have a very hard problem since we all have bugs, which is how can I know that a transaction is valid and that everyone's book has the same transactions at the exact same time? This is why we need a consensus mechanism. You remember, right? Okay, so let's start with Bitcoins consensus mechanism. Proof of work. What is it? Well, let's start again with a formal definition. And proof of work is a form of cryptographic zero-knowledge proof in which one party, the prover, proves to others, the verifiers, that a certain amount of a specific computational effort has been expended. Verifiers can subsequently confirm this expenditure with minimal effort on their part. Well, at this point, you're probably like, this kid just invites me to this class and he starts talking complete nonsense and I'm gonna leave. Well, no, I'm gonna explain it simply, I promise. This made no sense at all, and I agree. The definitions, the formal definitions, make no sense, most of them. We need to find a way to agree on transactions. This is our problem, right? What if we just trust whichever book that has more work put into solving math problems? Because then, if someone were to overcome our system and double spend, like copy their own transactions, it will take an enormous amount of work. That person will have to overcome the whole system, computational power, like if it were people solving math problems or computers, they would have to overcome a lot of computational power to be able to do that, right? They would have to have more power than the whole network combined. That is what we call a 51% attack. When someone has control of 51% of the network, they can do basically whatever they want. So BSV, Bitcoin Satoshi version, I think, recently suffered a 51% attack. Ethereum Classic ETC has suffered that too in the past. So it is possible, but when we are talking like the Bitcoin network is such a huge network that becomes simply unfeasible, right? Okay, how does this whole math solving thing work? Well, imagine I have a one-way function. I can do this function, but I cannot undo it easily. But first, let's start with the very mathematical definition of a function. A function maps every element in a set called the domain to an element in a set called the counter domain. So, for example, let's say my function is the color of my clothes, right? So I apply this function to my shirt, and I have red. I apply this function to my coat, and now I have gray, right? I can apply it to, for example, this box, if you can see this, but because it's not my clothes, and so I cannot apply this function. And one thing that is very important about a function is that it can only map a single element in the counter domain to an element in your domain. So I can't have a shirt that, for example, I apply this function to my shirt and it is both like yellow and blue at the same time. I can have a shirt that is color that is a mixture of yellow and blue, right? But I cannot have a shirt that is yellow or blue. You understand? However, I can have two red shirts, for example, right? So imagine also this function is very, very sensitive. Even the smallest change results in a completely different result. One example of a function like this is a function called SHA-256. It is very easy to compute a single value, but every change made is extremely sensitive in the end result. So, how can you use these functions for proof of work? Here I put POW for abbreviation. It's not prisoner of war, it's proof. Okay? So let's say that each set of n transactions, including a set number of oranges, has one and only one special number. What makes this number so special? Let's say that when we apply the SHA-256 function, which I did here, this little diagram, let's say, for example, you put CryptoGuard to SHA-256, it generates this value, and you convert it to binary, and you have this. If you put CryptoHarden, for example, I change just one letter, and you can see it's a completely different result, right? You can see almost nothing matches. And say when we convert this number to binary, first m zeros that the first m characters it has are zeros, right? Well, how does this number help us? How does this number solve our problems? Well, since our function is one way, meaning we cannot undo it, the only way we can find this number is if we brute force it. Like we go one number after the other and we try it forcefully until we get one that satisfies this property. If a number starts with m zeros, the probability of this happening is 1 divided by 2 to the power of m. So, for example, if we try 30 zeros, it's a chance of about 1 in a billion. If we try 40 zeros, it's about 1 in a trillion, right? We can then adjust the difficulty of finding this number if we adjust the number of zeros we have in our target. Okay. What does this even mean for us? We can easily verify that someone put a certain amount of work into finding this number, right? Because they had to try like at least 1 billion or different numbers till they got that one. And all we need to see for us to prove that they expended this enormous amount of computational work is to see it starts with that m zeros. So very much a lot of people, they compare this to Rubik's Cube, right? You can solve a Rubik's Cube, everyone can see that it's solved, and it's hard to solve. However, I think that this is a bit of a bad comparison because if you get into Rubik's Cubes, you will know that they have a specific algorithm you can do to solve them, right? And this function doesn't have that. You have to try like by chance. Just try every single number until you get one that matches. Okay, so how can we set an order for these blocks so that our transactions happen in a set order? Well, we can just have each transaction block, which has, we define the number of transactions in a transaction block to have its own special number and also the number of the previous block. So in this little diagram I made, you can see we have the previous block number and its own number, right? Besides a lot of information. Now, what does that mean? Now, if we change a block, even very, very likely, the result is vastly different. So remember, SHA-256 is very, very sensible. So sensitive is the right word, actually, right? Then this block would be a lot different. And if this block is a lot different, then this block would be way different, right? Okay. So what are the implications of this? Well, we now have a D-Orange exchanging network, which is decentralized because we don't have to trust a single person, right? It is very hard to tamper with because, well, to overcome our network, one would have to expend like a lot of computational work trying to find those numbers. It is irreversible in transactions because all transactions depend on the one before it, so we cannot reverse any transaction. And it's public for everyone to verify. Everyone can see that the transactions start with those amount of zeros, and everyone can see that every transaction is valid. If we swap our D-oranges for coins, now we got proof of work. So a little bit of homework, which I know it's boring, but can really help, is this. I'm going to exit the presentation now. I would like you to read the introduction to this study. Let me see. This is called Computer Systems Established, Maintained, and Trusted by Mutualist Groups, right? And the introduction to this paper is from 1982, so it's before Bitcoin, but it can really give you a perspective into what the thought process behind Bitcoin is. Things. Also, proof of work was initially designed for contain spam. They wanted to make a system such that whenever you want to send an email, you need to expend a certain amount of work in your computer. So, for example, if you want to send just 1 or 2 emails at a time, it's like a very small amount. But if you want to send thousands of emails at a time, it becomes like a huge computational effort, and it becomes a lot harder to send like thousands of spam emails at once. And well, this paper is great, and the introduction I think will give you a lot of perspective. And also one thing is reading white paper and seeing if you can identify the concepts that I teach here today. Okay, so this was the presentation, but I mean, if you have any questions, if you want to discuss something. Yeah, it's very interesting. I was trying to look into how SHA-256 works, but it's a bit complicated for my leg, I think. Like here, there's a diagram, but yeah. Oh, and also one thing I think is very interesting is that we don't have proof that SHA-256 is one way, right? We don't have like concrete mathematical proof that SHA-256 is one, but we like heavily trust on it. Like most things in the internet are protected by this. Bitcoin is protected by this, right? So if anyone ever found a way to reverse SHA-256, they would be like instantly billionaire because they would mine all the Bitcoin in seconds, right? They would, they could hack like every website, everything that they. Yeah. Yeah, that was most of the presentation. This was kind of the time I wanted to reserve for like answering questions if people had anything they wanted to talk about. Yeah, the most interesting thing for me was the fact that I study mathematics, and like mathematical demonstrations for me are very interesting. But the fact that we don't have any demonstration that it is one way, and yet we rely so heavily on it, it's just so fascinating for me. I was watching the other day, like the a video that the title was like pure clickbait, like solve this problem and you'll be a billionaire. And I watched it, but it was just it. But yeah, it's very interesting. I think. Yeah, first year. I actually started last year, but due to the pandemic and my teachers were like not very good. One of them, they like the ink on their pen ran out in the middle of the class, and they just refused to switch the pen. So they just kept writing as if the pen had ink, and we just had to imagine what he was writing. So I prefer to like pause the university and continue this year. There's no specific person that runs it, right? So all the blocks are generated by one miner, and I would like to talk more about mining this presentation. I would talk about gas fees, mining, and proof of stake. But essentially, uh, the network is not run by a single person. That's why it is decentralized. Remember, we all have like our own copies of the books. We all can process those math problems and contribute to it. Yeah, I think there are a lot of like uh, Dogecoin. I think it has its own blockchain. Litecoin, Ethereum Classic, that Bitcoin Satoshi version, Bitcoin Cash. There's a lot of them, and lots of different like consensus mechanisms too. Like, uh, let me search for a bit. I can't see properly, by the way, but there's a lot of them. There's the Byzantine fault tolerance that you talked about a little bit in the NFT presentation. There's a mechanism called proof of burn. There's proof of stake. There's proof of work. There's proof of almost everything that you could think. Well, uh, anything else? Yeah. Next time will be proof of stake. I think it's a little bit simpler to understand once you got the idea from proof of work, right? And so I don't think it will take like a lot of time. So we can have mining gas fees like the same presentation. Yeah, it's essentially computers, right? So for Bitcoin specifically, we have developed things we call ASICs. First, wait, can you see my screen or not? I think it will mute tab. Wait a sec. We have things called ASICs. And ASICs are like not these shoes. uh, they are like this specific computers that you can use to specifically mine Bitcoin and our other cryptocurrencies. But anyone with a computer can run this algorithm because it's really a simple algorithm that's fast to run each time and check to see if they find a number with like those zeros. So there's people that even started to mine Bitcoin in a Game Boy, I think. But it would take like 1,000 years to mine a Bitcoin, something like that. Yeah, right. But also we have to remember that Bitcoin just its difficulty, right? Because I don't want to have a lot of per second. So the each well, going a little bit into mining, whenever you mine a block, you receive a reward in Bitcoin. A number of Bitcoin is created like out of thin air to reward you for solving this problem. So it has a limit on the blocks per minute. I think for Bitcoin it is one block each 10 minutes, and it tries to keep the difficulty of the problems so that one block is solved every 10 minutes. So as machines get more powerful, like the older machines can mine less Bitcoin time. So machines from a few years back, most of them, I think they are even profitable when you consider the cost of energy. Yeah, it's running on all those blocks, right? So it's running slowly. Just so the diagram for the block right here. Uh, we have like a lot of transactions and data in each block, and the information lives on these blocks and can be accessed at any time with the blockchain explorer. Yes, it is completely decentralized. See, yeah, blockchain explorer. Any transaction, you can verify it by yourself. Don't trust people. You say, Bitcoin is getting manipulated. You can check that. Uh, since it's public, we have on-chain analysis. Like so many people have done it, like Willy Woo, and those people, they can see which people are sending Bitcoin to other people. They can see which people are buying, which people are selling. And that can have like pretty powerful consequences when you're trying to handle it. Yeah, it's all public information for Bitcoin, but there are privacy coins like Monero, and I think there's another called Secret. Yeah, Secret Network. Well, there's a lot of them, right? And as we get more regulation and cryptocurrency, I think Bitcoins will only grow, right? Stop it now.